Thank you everybody for joining today's webinar. We have a crowded folks in here, so lots of people joined. If you have questions, please put them in the FAQ question in the bottom of your C, and we're going to answer these questions during the webinar or at the end of the webinar. So please do not hesitate to ask some questions. What we're talking about today is the APIIDA API Gateway Manager, and this will, by the way, be a live presentation and live demonstration, and is tailored for layer 7 Broadcom environment. The second part, what we're going to do is we're talking about the future of API management. Very important, very interesting. So the question would be, where are you in the moment? Are you API 1.0 or API 3.0 in the future? So where are you in the moment? But before we going deeper into these topics, my name is Peter Mörsch. I'm head of sales and business development at APIIDA. And next to me is Markus Müller, CTO and head of development at APIIDA as well. Hello, Markus.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Peter.
Very cool. So we're jumping into the topics. So next slide, please. So what we're talking about today is how to make it easy for our administrators to operate the layer 7 environment. This can be very complex and it's always boring or sometimes boring, but this can be reduced. And we're talking about how to reduce the time and save time by working with the layer 7 gateway, but also working with the APIs. And our customers, you see on the right side, using our API Gateway Manager gave us nice quotes already. They said, API Gateway Manager increases the speed from idea to new services. And this is one of the best things we can do. So speed up the environment, speed up the API solutions. Next slide then will be the complete overview, what we're doing together with layer 7. So layer 7 itself is a very secure API gateway. This has been told from KuppingerCole just recently. They made an analysis about the runtimes in the market. And they said the layer 7 gateway is one of the securest in the market. So very good. Then with the features of layer 7, you can really work every nice service you would like to build. Then on top of the API gateway from layer 7, we have built our layer 7 gateway manager. This is only to manage the environment. And you see some of the features lined out in here. We're not able to talk about all of them today, but you see some are lined out. One important is the CI/CD pipeline integration and automation. This is where our customer says this is really great. Automation to speed up the processes. As well, view and analyze dependencies. So there are lots of nice information in here we can work with and help you in the daily business. That said, I would like to hand over to Markus Müller, who will give the presentation as well, talking about the use cases. Markus?
Yeah, thank you. So today I brought 3 use cases for you to look at and for us all to discuss. So the first thing is, the bread and butter of operating an API gateway. So this is about migrations, migrating reliably between stages, just making sure that you get your developments through all of your stages until they hit production. The second use case will be focused around API ops. So we'll learn how to use Git as a single source of truth within our layer 7 environment. And use a CI/CD pipeline to automate testing and deployment. So this is especially this use case saves you a lot of time, decreases the risk and increases the quality of your day-to-day operations. And the third use case we want to look at today is centered around predictive maintenance. So how do you continuously monitor your whole infrastructure for potential problems? How do you adhere to best practices, and how API Gateway Manager can help you to do so? So let's jump into our live environment. We have our API Gateway Manager here. So let's log in. And for this demo, we have a rather limited environment because we want to keep it short, keep it concise. So in this environment, we have like a development stage that has gateway, an integration stage, and our production stage. The stages itself are not limited in any way in the Gateway Manager, as well as the number of gateways that you monitor. You can register single gateways, you can register ephemeral gateways, Docker-based ones, so containerized gateways. You can register whole clusters, so that is up to you, right? So the Gateway Manager just handles all of your infrastructure for layer 7. The second thing I'd like to show you is the view on your APIs. And this is a consolidated view, so it's all the APIs that are running on your gateways. You see here the number of instances which tell you, okay, it's deployed in all of my 3 stages, and so on and so on. And yeah, let's do our very first migration. So migrations in the Gateway Manager are always a 2-step process. So first step is preparation. In order to start the preparation, we need the Gateway Manager to actually tell what we want to do. So in this case, we want to migrate from the development gateway into, let's say, the integration gateway, and let's prepare the migration. In this step, Gateway Manager, does all the necessary checks to make sure everything will work out fine. It will look for problems that might be a showstopper for our migration, and it then presents us with this overview where you can exactly see what is about to happen. So, for example, this performance test API that we want to migrate in this example, this will be updated as with layer 7 migrations you might be used to when using the Gateway Migration Tool, the GMU, to do your migrations in the past. It's not only the services you want to migrate, but also all of the dependencies to really make sure that it's capable of running on your target. And one of the dependencies, for example, is this private key here. But we don't want to migrate any private key at all, right? So this is something that's specific to the stage, that's specific to the environment. We never want to migrate that. And there's an easy way to tell Gateway Manager exactly that. So we just set it to ignore, and that's it. We don't have to care about that private key in any of our migrations anymore, right? So we just told the Gateway Manager, just ignore it, and that's good. So we prepared our migration. Let's perform it. And only now the target gateway is hit. So all the checks, all the operations before that are basically calculated on what we call a digital twin of your gateway. So only in the very last moment when you either test the migration or perform the migration, then the target is hit. And that's it, our migration was successful. Now, this is a Hello World example. As you can find a lot of times in tutorials and quick starts, but that is nothing how you do a migration or the problems you face with migrations in the real world. So let's jump over to another example. So to get a real world example, what we did is we imported the Open API example service, Swagger Pet Store. This is freely available on the internet. We imported it using the Layer 7 Dev Portal. So this gives you a service that is as close as possible to a real production service. A simple one, but a real production service. And now just look at the same migration again. So we migrate from our Layer 7 gateway, from the development one, to our production gateway in that case, and let's prepare it. The thing with services that are imported by the developer portal is that they require a lot of dependencies. And as you will note, you are currently not seeing these dependencies. And why is that? That is because we take care of them. So we filter all of the elements that Layer 7 thinks should be migrated and filter it if they really need to be migrated. In that case, we know that this service depends on the OAuth toolkit. We know that this service was initially imported by the developer portal. So all of these dependencies that come with installing the OAuth toolkit, enrolling your gateway in the dev portal, we take that out and just give you what we call focus mode, so that you can only, or that you only need to focus on everything that you really want to change. And in that case, this is only the service and the policy for that Swagger Pet Store demo. And I'll show you the original view, how it looks like when you don't have these requirements, when you migrate like you would do with the stock layer 7, how that compares to this focus view. Another thing I want to highlight here before we do that is that there is an error on our source gateway. So somewhere in our dependencies or in our services, an encapsulated assertion is referenced. And this encapsulated assertion isn't even found on the source. So there's no way this can be migrated successfully. And that is a feature that we're quite proud of, because this is something that you would eventually only find in the production, right? So you migrate it across all your stages. Migrations go fine because gateway, if it doesn't know what to do, it just ignores it. And then you end up with a service in production that is missing an encapsulated assertion. So this is like one of the cornerstones of the application, where we try to find problems, to highlight problems before we even execute this migration, right? And we'll find that kind of thinking in the product a lot, and I'll highlight it when we get there. So as I just said, let's compare it to what migration would look like if we didn't use these advanced functionalities of the Gateway Manager. So for every API that the Gateway Manager manages, you can define these requirements that I talked of. And now let's just remove them. Let's say, okay, we don't care if that's a portal service. We don't care if it needs the OAuth toolkit. Just do the migration as you would be doing the migration using the Gradle policy plugin or a GMU. So we do the very same migration. And this is what you get if you're not using the Gateway Manager. Okay, so all of the dependencies are now drawn into the migration, and you're really hard pressed to even find the elements that you want to migrate, even find the ones that that you might have changed. In that case, the Swagger pet store and the pet store fragment. And even if you want to do migrations like this, so if you have a lot of internal services that you reference, a lot of fragments, a lot of encapsulated assertions. So even if you want to do these big migrations, we will support you by highlighting all the elements that actually are different between source and target. So all the elements that will change. So we highlight them in green. So basically everything that is not green, okay, it's the same on the source, on the target. You don't have to check that. And yep.
Yeah, there's a question regarding the twin of the gateway.
Yeah.
You said, are we still in the configuration piece, or is this already moved to the real gateways?
No, as I said, it's a two-step process. So right now we just prepared it. So and during preparation, we don't hit the target gateways. It's just when we hit the perform button up here, then we hit the target gateway. So right now I can abort the process. I can cancel the progress altogether. And even if I find a problem after migration has been executed, we also provide a rollback for every migration that we do, so that you can roll back to the previous state, right? So that's something that you don't get out of the box with layer 7 as well. This is one of our features that we bring to the table, that you can roll back any migration that you did with the Gateway Manager.
Thank you.
All right, so yeah, that basically is the migration feature. However, migrations are, as I said in the introduction, it's the bread and butter functionality. But what you really want to do is what we'll look now in the second use case, and that is, deploying or applying some of the principles of API Ops. So without further ado, if there are no other questions, we will jump over to the second use case and look at how to realize API Ops with layer 7. Right. So there seems not to be some more questions, so let's just dive in. So what with the API Gateway Manager is capable of is putting an API as code in a version control system, and usually that is Git. So we, instead of having the master, the single source of truth of an API reside in one of the development gateways, we extract it from there and we put it in the Git repository. And the good thing about that is that you now get like versioning for free, because you can tag commits in the Git repository any way you want. You can use semantic versioning, you can use any other kind of versioning, and you can always reference this version. You can always reference this tag. And that is something that you can't do with the stock layer 7, because the versioning in layer 7 works isolated. It's a local versioning on the very gateway itself, which basically means that the version numbers you have, or the revision numbers as it is called, on one gateway do not map to the revision numbers on another gateway. Even if you're doing migrations, you end up with different revision numbers and it's hard to keep track. So the better approach to this is to extract it as code and then just do versioning using Git. So we have done so with this service, with this API Ops demo. And for example, what we can do now is we can do some changes to this service in sorry, in the policy manager, and then push it to the Git repository again using the gateway manager, right? So if we did that, if we did some changes within the policy manager, we now select from which gateway we want to extract our service. And for example, we can also select a branch or create a new branch in the Git repository where we want to push it. So we don't change anything here. We use the defaults and we push it. And if we now look into our Git repository, what we now have is like 8 seconds ago, we committed some data to it, some updates. And what you can also see here is that the original user that used the gateway manager to push this data, that is automatically added to every commit, so that you can, really know who changed things. And if you try to do that on your own, for example, using the gateway migration utility, you know that this isn't as easy as it sounds, because, for example, the default for GMU is one big XML file that has everything inside of it. So your Git repository would have only one file. So no matter what you would change, this file is updated, which means you get a lot of merge conflicts, you get a lot of noise in the diff. And we basically solved this by splitting things up. So for example, every type of element that is changed gets its own file, and we switch from XML to JSON in order to, make it more friendly to read, make it easier to implement, because even if you use external tooling, a lot of the times these tools today don't understand XML anymore. So we switch to JSON to do that. Okay, now one of the benefits that you get like for free when you use a Git repository is that you now get all the integrations that come with it. And the most popular being to trigger a CI/CD pipeline whenever something in that Git repository changed. So we just did a commit, and as you can see here, the CI/CD pipeline, in this case we use Jenkins, but you can use any other as well, picked up the change automatically and started a pipeline run. And in this pipeline, what we do is we use the gateway manager to perform a migration like the one that we saw before to a special integration environment. The pipeline then executes a set of Postman tests, for example, right? So it runs some automated tests. And if there are no errors in this automated test, then the change is published into production. So this is a very convenient way to make sure that all the changes, travel through a defined pipeline, the automated tests are run, and only if everything is green, or if you use Jenkins, everything is blue, then it is promoted to the final stage. You don't have to migrate directly to production, You can also migrate to an environment where the manual QA takes place, and then you can go from there. Again, good thing about using Git and about using the Git built-in versioning is that you can decouple the QA process from the development process, because now you just move that that release to the stage where manual QA happens. Manual QA does its job, and then they can exactly tell you this version of the API proxy, this is cleared for production, not the newer ones, not the intermediate ones, but exactly this version. This is what we tested. This is allowed to go live. And that makes your life a lot easier. Now, another thing that you can do when you treat your APIs as code, for example, is that you can also do changes in code. So we don't need to use Policy Manager. We can just go into the policy here. Let's see what we have. There's a comment in it, so we can just edit the file either on your local machine or within the Git repository. That doesn't matter. Changed in code, and we just save it. We commit it to the Git repository, and again, that is a change that gets automatically taken care of by our pipeline. So let's scan the pipeline. And as we can see, it found some changes. It's now like, working. It's waiting for some time before it kicks off the workflow. And here we go. Now, this change that wasn't even done in Policy Manager is automatically populated through our pipeline. And again, all the migrations are taken care of the Gateway Manager. So you get also all of that advanced migration handling by the Gateway Manager, which basically means if the migration isn't prone to be successful, it isn't executed at all. And we have many more advanced functionality about the migration that is executed here as well. So now this again is a Hello World service, right? It's a very, very small service. But how do you get your existing heavyweight real world services into a Git repository? And again, we got you covered there. So let's just create a new repository and call it Swagger L7 demo. This just creates an empty repository. And now we go again to our Swagger Pet Store demo, go to the version control tab, enter the repository URL of our new build repository, and just push everything that's currently on the development gateway into this new repository. Always will take a bit longer, as that is, the real world service with all of these dependencies. And if we go into our repository now, you can see as well that it has been pushed the same way the other service was pushed, and it's a much bigger one with all the dependencies in it. And this is basically one of the problems that you need to solve when using Git, because these dependencies themselves, you don't want them to be in every repository for every API. So if you have like some shared components or the OAuth toolkit, for example, we don't want any of it to end up in this very repository, because that way you would have like 5, 6, 7 copies of the same dependency. And that means that your migrations aren't predictable anymore. They aren't repeatable anymore. So again, this requirements features come to help here. So let's just tell the system that this API relies on the OAuth toolkit. So just add all of the solution kit it relies on, and add the library it relies on. And now Gateway Manager is smart enough to know that we did push it to a Git repository and that we afterwards changed the requirements. So it tells us here that we might want to update our Git repository, and let's just do it. So it conveniently displays this button here. We just click it. Okay, and now let's look at our at our repository again, and you'll notice all of these dependencies are gone. So that is basically what is happening in focus mode with the migration. We take out everything that is not really important for this migration, as it's a prerequisite. We do the same with the Git export, which basically means we take out all of the shared dependencies. And it doesn't matter if these are solution kits that are provided by Broadcom or if that are libraries of your own stuff that you rely on in all of your services. All right, so this concludes the API Ops use case. Any questions on this?
No, there came no question up. So this
All
was,
right.
like you said, automated testing and deployment using the CI/CD pipeline. Very good, thank you.
Exactly. And I know it's kind of a lot in a very short amount of time. So if you have questions afterwards, if you would like to test drive it yourself, don't hesitate to contact us. We can set up a quick demo, and Gateway Manager also has a free trial. So you can test drive this at any point in time. All right, so let's move on to our third use case, and that is the one about predictive maintenance. We have a feature in the product that is called the advisor. And the advisor basically checks your whole infrastructure for potential problems and for violations of best practices. So in this case, in my demo here, we are notified that we still are running insecure listening ports on our gateways. Now, if that is by design, if your architecture requires them to be HTTP, to be plain HTTP without encryption, you can always just suppress these advices. But in our case, we really want to be notified because in our installation, for example, we run zero trust, which basically means there is no unencrypted traffic. So if we forgot to close a port down, advisor notifies us. The second thing the advisor notifies us here in that example is we get notified about a certificate that in this case already has run out. So the advisor, among a lot of other checks all your private keys, your SSL keys, and your trusted certificates for expiry. We also plan to introduce a live test for if they are still valid. And now we can act on this, right? So now we know, okay, in production 1, there is that test backend.com certificate. Now, which services do use this certificate? And this is a question that is very hard to answer in layer 7. With the Gateway Manager, it's really, really easy. So let's just go to resources. Let's look at everything that's in our production environment. We want to have a look at a certificate, and here is the certificate. And we can now see, okay, when does it expire? How is it configured? On which systems was it found? And it also tells us that this resource is dependent on by this service. So now we know exactly where this certificate is used, where we might have run into problems, where we might have to replace that certificate with another one. And these dependencies are shown for everything, right? So for example, I can do it the other way around as well. So I can go here, I can go to that cert demo service, and it tells me, all right, it requires this trusted certificate. And as this service requires secure communication, also this private key is required. And we get that for every service, for every policy fragment, for every encapsulated assertion. So if you ever ask yourself, can I safely delete it? Is it used somewhere? If yes, where is it used? That question is really easy to answer with the Gateway Manager. Now, what we want to achieve is we want to turn a passive system that is like actively check your gateways for their well-being into a proactive system, which basically means you are told when anything is or when something is not in order. And to achieve this, we have built-in automations. So for example, whenever there is a defect registered, like that certificate that has run out, you can act on it. You can actively, send a mail, send a message to your Teams chat or your Slack chat, or you can also create, for example, an incident at your Jira service desk. So when the operation guys open up the service desk, they see immediately, oh, that certificate is about to run out. You have to replace it. Get in touch with whoever you need to get in touch with. Beside these kinds of automations, we also have automations on, like, if a migration started, if it finishes, if it was successful, if it failed. So for example, you could do a simple message in a Slack channel like, okay, migration to production has started. And when, because of whatever reason, migration to production failed, then you don't want to send just a Slack message, right? And then you want to send an email, you want to page people using Twilio, or you want to call any other service using a generic webhook. And that is everything built in the product in order to make sure that it proactively notifies you. So that concludes our live demo and our use case. Are there any questions on this third use case, Peter?
No, there are no other questions, so go ahead, please.
All right. Then we go back to our presentation. All right. Are you going to do this slide, Peter, or am I?
Are you doing this?
All right. So the second part of the webinar focuses around the future of API management. So in order to predict the future, you always have to look at the past. So the first wave of API management tools came around when companies realized they needed to open up. So we had the rise of mobile applications, we had interactive web pages, and all of these needed to access corporate data. So we saw the first wave of API management, and Layer 7 is basically one of the very first of these tools, and it's still around. It has been updated numerous times, but that is its origin. And then we saw these big disruptions in the market due to cloud native technologies. And with them came a second wave of API management that basically was built in a cloud native way. However, solutions were still closed, proprietary, and the companies started to use multiples of these services for different kinds of scenarios. And this is where we are now. And we as APIIDA think that future of API management is what we call API management 3.0, the third wave. And as we have seen with other technologies, it will be about independence, it will be about technology agnosticism, it will be about just making sure you manage your APIs and not your API gateways. So for example, if you will, or if you want to compare it to the cloud movement, it's not about managing your virtual machine anymore, right? Not the runtime that really executes the code, but it's about managing your workload. And the same is true for APIs, at least that is what we believe. It's not about managing your runtime, your API gateway. It's about managing the APIs that run on this gateway. So are we the only ones thinking like that? No, there is proof for our approach. The first quote is one from Gartner. And if you read through this, you see that exactly that's the idea that we also have. You have to manage and govern all your APIs. And you have to manage both the internal APIs and third-party APIs. And not only a single type, right? So most of you, if you deploy Layer 7, either have some legacy SOAP service or some REST services. Some might even have some Java messaging services around. But for example, Layer 7 isn't capable of managing asynchronous APIs, completely asynchronous APIs like Kafka or MQTT stuff like that. So you need a second management platform. And that is something where Gartner says, okay, you need to manage all of them. As well, from a report on API complexity, companies that run multiple of these systems, they really have a pain point that management is time consuming. You get a lot of inconsistencies with the policies and the governance. You don't have any unified visibility, and that fragmented experience is really hard to come by, as you have to be an expert in like all of the different systems. So this is something where there is proof in the market that something has to change, and we are the ones that want to change that. So what is the roadmap to API Management 3.0? And there's something that we call the API Management Maturity. And the very first step is, well, just use an API management platform at all. There are a lot of companies out there that have APIs, that have data published, but they don't run an API management platform. right? And that is where layer 7 can really help you out because it is very broad functionality. The second level is to adhere to these principles that we just showed in the live demo, the API ops principles. Highly automated processes, really in the spirit of DevOps. So this is the next step up from when you already have a platform. And this is where the API Gateway Manager comes in as a next step on top of layer 7. And that what we call API or 3.0 basically is autonomous API management. So as I just said, it's important to manage your APIs and not the gateways they run on. That's just infrastructure. That just has to work. But what you really want to manage are the APIs or the API proxies. You want to make sure it's secure. You want to make sure they are configured correctly. You want to make sure if there are changes, they are correctly migrated through the stages and end up in production. And you want to know the analytics on these APIs and so on and so on and so on. Again, this is where the Gateway Manager comes into play. So if you want to look at it from a different angle, what exactly is that third generation API management? Well, it's centralized management. So discovery, provisioning, security of APIs, you centralize all of that, but you decentralize the operations, you decentralize the executions. And that allows for some neat scenarios where you have like a corporate IT that basically takes care of all the centralized management, gives you a common ground, but every team is capable of choosing the runtime that is the best tool for the task at hand. Just because you deploy, layer 7 doesn't mean that you can mix in, an AWS Lambda function from time to time, right? So if you need to, proxy that through all of your gateways, this just adds unnecessary bloat, unnecessary complexity. And if you go with the idea of that API 3.0, this is a non-issue, right? Because you extract the management out of the runtimes. So in a nutshell, future of API management, we do believe that unified holistic management of all your APIs is essential and that it has to become a strategic topic, like the multi-cloud strategy, for example, right? So it's not, API management is not a necessity anymore. There's something that you have to do because otherwise your gateway doesn't work and you don't know how to get an API on it. No, you have to look at APIs really as a strategic asset, and you have to make sure you get that right. You have to make sure you have excellence in that. However, as I said, the real execution layer, where is that API proxy really executed? That should at best be interchangeable. That way you prevent vendor lock-in, right? From a more, on the chart on the right, basically tells you, okay, what is the strategic API management? It's all of the policies you enforce. It's all of the guidelines you enforce in order to guarantee high quality APIs that perform and be used in the marketplace, and all your specs. This is what strategic API management is about, and that is pushed down into the execution. And you gain a lot of flexibility, you gain a lot of agility, you improve security, you improve the company-wide governance, and eventually you also improve time to value, because you don't have to fiddle around with all these tools. And if you need a new tool, you can introduce it without any implications on security and on governance. And this is where we say, okay, this is the future of API management. Everyone should work like this. All right, so this brings me to the end of my part. And Peter, would be great if you do a short wrap up.
Yes, thank you very much. So this was great insights. So we have had in the beginning, we have the APIIDA API Gateway Manager to help you to manage your layer 7 environment. And then we talked about APIs. So API version 1 to API version 3. And the question would be, where are you today? And what we believe is that decoupling the management from the layer 7 or other runtimes is a first step to a unified API management system. So if you would like to get more information out of this, then please contact us, like LinkedIn or Twitter, or just send us an email. Otherwise, show around. We are happy to get connected. We are happy to run a demo for yourself as well. Listen in for the next webinar. So far, I cannot see any other questions. So I would say thank you very much to everybody and see you for next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.